This episode of the Aging Well podcast, I'm excited to welcome Sally Roberts, a former elite wrestler and the dynamic co-founder and CEO of Wrestle Like a Girl. Sally has not only made her mark in the world of wrestling, but has also become a powerful advocate for empowering women and girls through sports. Her journey from the wrestling mat to leading an organization dedicated to breaking barriers and promoting gender equity is nothing short of inspiring. I am thrilled to have her share her insights on resilience, leadership, and the role of sports in aging well. Sally, it is a tremendous pleasure to have you on the Aging Well podcast. So let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to become an icon in the sport of wrestling.
Thank you for having me. Really, really honored, quite humbled to be here. I'm a two-time world bronze medalist, a combat veteran in special operations, and the co-founder and CEO of Wrestle Like a Girl, which is now the global advocacy organization for girls and women in the sport of wrestling. And I came into this world, into the sport. Really, I say some people find wrestling, and then for other people, wrestling finds them. And I was one of those people that wrestling found me. Growing up, I had a troubled childhood. I would go out after school and shoplift and break into houses and get into fights, usually against boys, but I always won. And I got put in front of a juvenile detention officer who, like everyone at this point in their life, had just completely had it. They were all exasperated. And they said, hey, listen, if you don't find an after-school activity, you're going to face going to juvenile detention. And I couldn't have told you about Pacific University or Stanford, University of Washington, any of those schools, because no one in my peer group went. But I could have told about juvenile detention because I had so many of my crew, they did go. And they all just came back and said, you don't want to go there. Like, if you have an opportunity to play after school and have fun, do that. So I did. I actually tried out for all the girls' sports, softball, basketball, volleyball. And they're all team sports. And when I would go out for the teams, I found myself getting cut because, well, the athletic coach said I didn't know how to play well with others. But that was crazy. I did know how to play well with, they said I was not athletic, which wasn't true. I was plenty athletic. It said I didn't know how to play well with others. Like I thought fighting was a form of love. Like it was just a completely different culture of how I got raised. And so I was like, okay, well, I tried out for all the girl sports. So what do I do now? And I looked at the list of after-school opportunities, and I saw that wrestling was a no-cut sport. And this was back in 1992. This was when, like, there was an effort. Like Title IX had already been passed, but girls and women, like when sports weren't really getting overly involved. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to go out and wrestle. Like they can't cut me, and as long as they don't cut me, I'm not going to go to juvie. And that was the reality of my landscape and the reason why I even got involved in the sport of wrestling at all.
I was wrestling in high school. There were some girls, very few girls that were, starting to kind of break into the sport, but there was so much resistance on the part of the sport itself. And there were rules in place that really made it difficult for girls to wrestle. Like I think one of the rules that some of the states came up with, you had to weigh in your underwear. So of course that's going to kind of discourage a lot of girls from doing it. And obviously there were some girls that said, screw it. I'll get up there in front of the boys in my underwear because I'm going to go out and wrestle. And, it was those girls and women like yourself that, have really pushed this sport forward. And I would make the argument that the men's sport right now has been saved and is stronger because girls have started to really grow in the sport. And, I help coach strength and conditioning at a local high school, where my son wrestled. And we had a few girls last year on the team. We had one girl who is just a phenomenal wrestler. I mean, she was better than most of the boys on the team. She's been an international champion and medalist. And even she couldn't draw girls into the program. And we have, one girl right now that's a pretty solid wrestler on the team. And every time I see her, it's like, you get any of your friends to come out, and she's really trying to work on them. But why should girls wrestle?
Oh, I think that, well, let's reverse that question and say, why should boys wrestle? And what happens to the boys that do wrestle? I mean, the boys that wrestle, You see them building their character, they're developing confidence, they're learning how to play well with others. And when they're learning these skills, character traits, attributes, and they're learning how to make that a part of their internal constitution, it really changes them and it drives them to become better citizens. And what happens to the better citizenry that gets created? We can look at the annals of history and see where our wrestlers have ended up. They become presidents of the United States, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, leaders of global Fortune 100 companies, leaders of movements. And so when I take a step back and say, wait a minute, if that's what happens to our boys, then doesn't it make sense that that's what would happen to our girls? And sure enough, it is. Girls are going out and wrestling, and they're getting the courage, the character, and the confidence that gets instilled to anyone that participates in that sport. And where are they going? Well, we've only right now started to develop that educational, that financial, social, education mobility pathway. And the girls right now are growing through that pathway. They're becoming women. They're getting college educated. They're going on to the military services, to the trade unions. They're becoming entrepreneurs, starting companies. They're running for office. And the world, quite frankly, is their oyster. And the more that we see that women's wrestling is progressing, the more that we see that the fabric of America is getting strengthened, because it is, in fact, those girls and women, like the state of California said, hey, it's going to be a mandated policy that we have women that serve on the board of public companies. Okay, well, who's going to be those women? Like, who are going to be the women that are able to, as I jokingly say, eat bullets for breakfast and sit across the table from 11 to 15 men as they're really grinding out what is the better move for a corporate company? It's going to be these women that have gone through the sport of wrestling. One of my really dear friends, Major General Paul Kennedy, he was in charge of recruiting command for the Marines. And he was one of the key people that made it so that women were able to be in the infantry in the Marines. And he was standing around with some of his brethren, and he said, mark my words, the very first female that's going to make it through this infantry course is going to have wrestled, because that's the only place within our American landscape where you have to learn how to dig deep, where you're getting punched in the face on a regular basis. You're getting your butt handed to you, and you have to look at your opponent, smile, and get up and know that it has everything to do with you, your head, your heart, your mind, your internal constitution. And sure enough, the very first female that made it through the infantry course for the United States Marine Corps, when she got finished, Major General Paul Kennedy pulled her aside and he said, hey, Marine, what's your background? And she said, I wrestled, and scattered away. And it was just like proof of concept. The women that are getting created to go through these tremendous pipelines of challenge, which is in fact just, we call it life, they're wrestlers.
I literally got chills listening to you give that whole answer. That was awesome. And really the simple answer is, who shouldn't wrestle, right? And so you obviously face some obstacles in this whole process. And I think we're seeing those barriers begin to tumble down much more rapidly. I mean, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. I mean, all this stuff is the sport is just growing tremendously fast. And I credit it to people like yourself and the, forerunners in the sport and people who are so passionate about the sport. But what obstacles did you face as a female in a male-dominated sport when you started wrestling?
I think that when people start wrestling, they're either running from something or running to something. And you either have a challenging background that you are punching your way out of, or you've been given a life that you need to punch your way into adversity so you understand how to deal with that. And for me, like, of course, you're going to have societal challenges and you're going to have cultural challenges. For sure. I mean, I think you're going to have that whether you're male, whether you're female, regardless of your race, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. You're going to have those challenges. The number one challenge that everyone has across the board that they have to navigate is their mind. The mind dominates the body. And if you can't overcome any of any of the negativity, any of the challenge, if you cannot learn how to find the joy in suffering, no one is going to survive in the wrestling room. So for me, my biggest challenge was figuring out all of these hurdles that I had to jump across and how I was going to figure out how to find the joy in that suffering and using it as a motivating tool.
And how do you believe sports, particularly wrestling, contribute to the empowerment and really the personal development of women and girls?
Well, with the passage of Title IX in 1972, it was a very, there was a promise made toward girls and women that if there is an opportunity that is presented to our male counterparts and there's federal funding, federal assistance behind that, they get to participate too. And really, it's an extension of that vision, which is women that understand how to take care of themselves. They understand how to take care of their teammates. They understand how to play on a team, and they're positive, contributing members to society. They're going to be able to nurture communities. And when you start to incorporate, why does that matter? Because women take care of their families, they take care of their homes, they take care of communities. When you look at them as business leaders, women take care of the cultural fabric of their businesses. When men tend to be more transactional, and that's historic. You can look through a lot of different leadership manuals on just the difference of how men and women create. When it came to the signing of the Good Friday Accord in Ireland, there was a lot of fighting and there was a lot of infighting. And when Hillary Rodham Clinton made a decision to bring more female leaders to the table because it was the women that were involved in the communities that were getting killed, that their families were getting murdered, when they brought the women to the table, they found a stronger ability to find peace, remedy, and reconciliation quicker. And they found that when women have a seat at the table, there's lasting peace. They're more serious about making sure that there is peace. So when we talk about the empowerment of women, we're talking about why does sports play a role? There was a landmark study from Ernst & Young. 94% of female C-suite executives have played a sport. The science already shows why sport is important. Now the challenge is figuring out how do we open up those avenues of opportunity for our girls and women. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the easiest avenue. It's okay to work hard. But here's the interesting thing. And I actually had to learn about this myself in business. There's been so many times where I felt like I had to earn my seat at the table. That meant that there was this business meeting happening or a sporting event, right? If we want to just go and use that term. And I felt like I had to earn my right to be there. So here's what I did. I crawled through broken glass under barbed wire, like withholding food and withholding water, and bullets were coming over the top of me. And by the time I get to the finish line and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it. I made it. I have now earned my seat at the table. My male counterparts are getting out of their Ferraris with their fresh, clean shirts, getting finished eating a sandwich and drinking some water, and they're sitting down fresh. They're sitting down fresh. So here's me feeling like I needed to earn my seat at the table, but guess what? That's where the work begins. And if you're coming to that table and you're already exhausted, then you actually have another 50 yards to go before you even have the mental capacity to start working alongside your male counterparts. So we do need to open up those doors of opportunity so that everyone can start at they start at the same starting line and they move forward together. There's another study from the Tucker Center, the Research for Girls and Women in Sport, run by Dr. Nicole Lavoie, out of the University of Minnesota. And there was a research study. They found that when girls and boys play sports at younger ages, they're able to get along and work collaboratively at older ages. And we want our American society to understand how to work together. And when we give kids if we give them sport, girls, boys, men, women, the opportunity to play together and learn societal rules under the umbrella of fun, but learning yourself and learning how to play with others, then the outcome, the product of that is a better, stronger nation, a better, stronger community, and better, stronger familial structures.
So you've obviously fought the fight getting to the table. And once you've gotten to the table, have you faced any particular challenges or specific challenges in advocating for gender equity in sports? And kind of what have you had to do to overcome those?
Yeah. So, in terms of what my biggest challenge has been, my biggest challenge, my biggest limiter has been myself. I got a business coach, and that happened because he's in the sport. He's seen the way that I'm ebbing and flowing. And he came to me and said, "Hey, Sal, I've known you for about 20 years. I'm a very successful business person. And I think I can help you. Would you be okay? Would you be open to the idea, the possibility of perhaps me guiding you?" And he really was smart in how he presented that, because sure enough, I would have said no if I felt like I was being pressured, I was being forced. I mean, I adamantly stood on this foundation, on this earth that I had formed and created, and I put my flag in and I said, "We're going forward from here." And and I had to learn how to play well with others. I still didn't know how to do that. So at one point, my business coach said to me, "Hey, Sal, what are all these dead bodies around you?" And I said, "Oh, good question. That person disagreed with me. That person didn't like my idea. That person said no. That person was annoying. That person turned us down for funding." And he looked at me and said, um, "You know, you're doing this all wrong." I said, "What do you mean I'm doing it all wrong?" And he said, "Your job is actually to be gaining alignment." And I looked at him very confused. And I said, "Listen, the only time I've ever heard anyone tell me anything about alignment was when it was either talking about my back or my car. I don't have any idea what alignment is." And he said, "Your job is to be a head coach." I looked at him and said, "I'm not a head coach, I'm a CEO." He was like, "Yeah, you're a CEO of an organization, of a movement." He said, "Your job is to be um, shepherding the movement while tending to your flock." And I looked at him still a little bit confused. And one of my good friends is Cale Sanderson. And he said, "Sally, your job is to be Cale Sanderson." And I got hit with this reality of, oh my God, if I am supposed to be a leader like Cale Sanderson, I am so wrong. I'm not bringing people together. I'm not loving them. I'm not nurturing them and building them up with positivity. I'm completely annihilating you if we don't have alignment, and I'm rolling right through you. And so I had a moment to stop and think about, well, what is leadership and what does that mean? And am I a leader? And if I was a leader, what's my leadership style? And I felt, for about 2 weeks, I was in existential crisis because I had not looked at myself and thought of myself as being a leader. I just thought, I'm Sally. And I went out on a limb and I started this organization because the girls and women deserved it. And there was no one else. So I got stuck with the short end of the stick. And so when I looked at myself and said, I'm a leader, and I had to start looking at myself on a regular basis and saying, I'm a leader. I'm a shepherd of the movement. My job is to tend to my flock. I mean, that was the biggest hurdle that I've had to overcome. And I still, on a regular basis, I'm continuing to understand leadership, learning how to lead myself so that I can lead other people. And it's been um, profound, I should say. Like, I never thought in my life that I would be here and I would be posing questions about how do I lead myself better? How can I lead people better?
And we should be clear for the listener, the viewer, that when you talk about dead bodies surrounding you, that we're talking figuratively, right?
Oh, yeah. Listen, that only highlights my world. I came from special operations. I mean, I got picked on teams in my special ops world because I wasn't the nicest person. I hadn't killed anybody. But listen, give me a good reason. I'm just kidding. No, I was just that fairly aggressive. And I prided myself on that aggression because that's what I needed when I was growing up. Like, that was my most basic instinct.
And that kind of leads to my next question, which wrestling requires a tremendous amount of resilience. And so how has your experience as a wrestler influenced your perspective on aging? We're going to kind of shift to the aging point now and staying resilient as you get older, because you had to deal with that as you kind of aged in the sport, and it is a sport that can age you out relatively young, and because it's not like years and years of professional. I know you competed on the Olympic level, world level. What were you, bronze medalist in the World Games, right?
Yeah,
And
two
so
times.
uh, I love that stud. What is the female equivalent to stud? And can we still say that in sports as we become more gender balanced in sport? But anyhow, what is kind of your perspective now as a wrestler? And I think you you're once a Marine, always Marine. Once a wrestler, always a wrestler, right? So how has that influenced your perspective on aging and really staying resilient as you get older?
My entire sense of self and being has continues to get shaped. I mean, first off, we get smarter, or at least we hope that we do. So, starting out in my career, I would lead with my head, literally and figuratively. I was like a bull in a china shop. I didn't care if I got concussions. I had no idea if it didn't matter. I wasn't conscientious about my nutrition. I was really able to put my body and mind, my head and body through the ringer so that I could win. Nothing was more important than winning. And as I continued to just get more educated on the importance of nutrition, on the importance of hydration, I had a better diet. I stayed better with hydration, and I stopped leading with my head. I like my head coach, Terry Steiner. He came from the University of Iowa, and there was a training philosophy called Iowa style, which is just super aggressive, and you would punch and you would fight, and it would be it was more like fighting than wrestling. And then as I started to really embrace a different way of being, I started looking at Penn State, and they were focused on wrestling tactically beautiful matches, not being afraid of fighting. You'd fight if you needed to, but technically and tactically proficient, where you didn't have to lead with your head, where you didn't have to get concussions. And if you did get a concussion, instead of Iowa style, where you said you may were like, well, maybe I did or maybe I didn't, I'm going to wrestle through it. It was, whoa, let me sit back and get some head and heart alignment and make sure that my faculties are good so I can retain my sensibilities. Um, and then as I continued on through my career, so I was an athlete, basically just ran myself into brick walls. As a soldier, again, ran myself into brick walls. And then up until recently, as a CEO, I mean, my gift is also my kryptonite, which is when I fall in love, when I find something I like, I become so passionate about it that nothing can take away my focus and my drive. So that was about 10 years at a very elite level for the wrestling, 10 years being in the militaries, both special operations and wrestling for the Army's World Class Athlete Program. And then, I'm at year 9 for Wrestle Like a Girl. And if it wasn't for my business coach that let me expend all of my energy, all that kinetic energy that I'm like the Tasmanian devil. Once that was expended, then it was, oh, come back, sit back. Let's talk about how we can lead as a business leader a new way. And I started meditating. I started doing Wim Hof breath work. I've been diving into different retreats that people go to so that they can essentially, when I started working with my business coach, he said he would only work with me under one condition. And that was that I had to go to therapy. And I said, go to therapy? What are you talking about? But I held him in such high esteem that I said, okay, I'll do it. And I said, well, I'll go, but why? And he said, because most people have a hard time going from good to great because they can't let go of the bullshit baggage around their ankles. And I was like, oh, I got a lot of baggage. I'll go. Let's just start offloading it. I didn't understand exactly what he meant, but that meant that I'm now diving into understanding food and nutrition in a way that makes you cognitively stronger. I'm understanding hydration and not just necessarily water. Water's great, but also just the importance of electrolytes. I'm understanding exercise, but not the kind of exercise that I need to run 6-minute mile repeats to feel good about myself. The kind of exercise that I'm doing it at such a pace that it makes it so that I can start remembering conversations and it ties into my brain synapses and memory and recall so that I can function at a higher level for longer. I'm learning about rest, healing, and recovery. Like my sleeping schedule is so dialed in. I'm stronger now because I've taken these things serious. It's like I learned chapters from wrestling and I've learned a chapter of knowledge from the military. And I've learned a chapter of knowledge from absolutely exhausting myself as a CEO, doing everything wrong, but trying to run my business like I'm an Iowa wrestler. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I can tighten everything up. I can be far more strategic, far more intelligent. I can work less, have just the same outcome, if not better, enjoy my life more, enjoy being around my friends and family, and serve the people. And I never thought it was possible. But my business coach said, Sally, you can have it all. And I thought, no, 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 you can't have it all. Like if we have our 5 F's, faith, family, fitness, friends, and finances, one of them has to suffer. That's just sort of the way life works. And he looked at me like I was crazy and said, no, not one area has to suffer. You can, in fact, have it all. And I was like, okay. So very timidly, I started moving forward and I am in fact finding that you don't have to find joy in suffering. You can actually just enjoy your life, build everything up and live a really beautiful life where you can have it all. You can work out and have fun and you can eat and have fun and you can drink as much as you want and have fun. I've been sober for since the beginning of this year and I'm having fun.
Wow. And that really goes beyond what I was going to ask my next question. So I'm going to have to expand on this next question. I was going to ask you kind of about the role physical activity plays in aging well, especially for women. I think you've hammered a lot of that home, but I think it's probably more important to ask the question, what role does that balance, or what I refer to as well-centered fitness, which is, the spiritual, the physical, intellectual, emotional, and social, what that balance plays in us aging well, and again, particularly for women, because like you said, a lot of women like yourself would think that you can't have all of those areas in balance. Something has to give. And what was it? Faith, family, friends, and finance. Was that the 4?
My 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, friends, and finances.
Okay. So those 5 are kind of along that similar vein. We tend to think that one of those has to give in order for the others, but in reality, everything needs to be balanced and centered. So how important is that from your perspective in terms of aging well?
So I consider myself Sally 2.0. Sally 1.0 was a version that was pre-2024. Sally 2.0 has dove headfirst into understanding leadership and leading myself. And I would say that I used to be completely exhausted, and I don't need to go through all of the ways that I felt and all the ways that I felt badly. But I can tell you now that I wake up every day with hope and optimism, and my hair is getting thicker, and I paint my nails, and my staff is happy, my people are happy, and it was so profound understanding how all of these things tied together that we now have Wednesday meetings. And at our Wednesday meeting, we do 2 things. One, we open it up with gratitude. Everyone has to say something that they're thankful for because we're spreading that culture within our organization. And 2, there's this really great movie called Legally Blonde, classic Americana.
One of my
And
daughter's favorites.
yeah, there's this one scene in there where Elle was talking about one of her sorority sisters and she was on trial for murder. And she said, listen, there is no way that so-and-so killed that person. She was like, it's impossible. She just came from the gym. Listen, exercise creates endorphins. Endorphins make people happy, and happy people just don't kill other people. And so within our organization of Wrestle Like a Girl, hey, if you work on our team You have to have gratitude and you have to work out because exercise creates endorphins. Endorphins make people happy and happy people just don't kill other people. And so my business partner and I, Amy, we've taken it really to heart where one of the things that we do every year is some sort of big event that we can't just sort of slack off and do. So one year we ran the Grand Canyon. Another year we went to the pool and swam a lot of laps. This next year we're looking to do um, um, the Santa de Cristo. That's not the name of it. Uh, there's a big walk in Spain. So we're going to go Santa Domingo. I'll look it up. But anyway, when it becomes a lifestyle and you're able to do it in balance and in moderation and include the people that you love into this space, it becomes something joyful that you look forward to. And it makes everyone feel good and it helps you just get along better in life. Where before, I wish I would have learned this, which is, hey, I would love to work out with you, but I don't want to do 6-minute mile repeats because I don't like the way that I feel afterward. And I would have such a hard time telling people because I felt like it made me a coward or it made me weak. And so instead of saying, hey, I'd like to do that, and I'm going to advocate for myself to say, let's find some common ground, which is let's just walk 15-minute miles and just go out there and have fun, I just wouldn't do it at all. And so I think the other powerful thing about aging, especially for women, but for men too, is understanding that advocating for yourself isn't weakness. It's actually a strength because it keeps you in the game. It keeps you involved longer. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's not 6-minute mile repeats or nothing at all. It's, hey, here's what I think my body wants and what my body needs. And a reason that was so challenging for me was because I was an athlete at a high level and I did what I was told. And I was a soldier who was enlisted and I did what I was told. And now I have to be a leader of a movement and I have to tell people. I mean, it was a complete mental shift. And frankly, it was a tectonic shift for me. And so I still find myself, my most basic instinct is to say, no, I don't want to do it. When in fact it is, hey, I would like to be present with you, but my body is feeling a certain kind of way and I'd like to meet you halfway. And being okay with the fact that walking is exercising. And I was just listening to one of your podcasts recently, which was when's the best time to work out? And frankly, it's whenever you can get to the gym. It's better, like the best time to work out is whenever you can get there. And to be able to build a community around you that is able to appreciate those same things, I think that's when you really make all the good things in life come together.
Yeah, I would say you're probably actually Sally 3.0 because you got that whole kind of pre-wrestling Sally, and then you got into the wrestling that kind of redirected your life, and now you're kind of figuring out this next tectonic shift in your life. And I got to ask you, are you spelling gratitude with 2 T's? Because that's my mission, is to kind of get that word to be changed in its spelling so that we're talking in terms of an attitude of gratitude, which sounds like what you're trying to accomplish in your business.
Well, so we don't sign it with 2 T's because that's the first I've been hearing of it. So, hey, I'm open for it. I'll bring it up for discussion. We work together collaboratively and I am a leader, but I'm also a teammate.
Because that's my mission. One of my missions is to kind of get people to change that spelling to have 2 T's in it because it does reflect it. Our gratitude is really something of an attitude. I mean, it's easy to say, okay, thank you for doing this. I mean, I'm going to thank you probably many times for doing this podcast with me today. But it's that continuous attitude of gratitude that really, really drives us and kind of keeps us in the right frame of mind. So I love that that's where you're kind of going with the business. Do you have any other advice that you could give for women who want to stay active and healthy as they age? And especially for those that don't have a background in sport, because I think those that don't have the background in sport aren't the ones that are so driven to do the 6-minute mile repeats. They're just the ones that are probably much more content to just walk with their cup of Starbucks coffee and chat with a friend and call it exercise. And we know that somewhere there's got to be a balance between the two. So you have any good advice, any sage advice for women that just want to stay healthy and age well?
when I was deployed to Afghanistan, so I was in a special operations team, and I had to do some really brave and courageous things. So this was after wrestling, right? Wrestling, I really cut weight. I was always trying to get to 59 kilos, which was 129.9 pounds. And I would work so hard on controlling my nutrition to be small, to be thin, to make it so that I didn't have challenges making weight. So then, um, 2012, I'm deployed to Afghanistan, going out and doing some very brave and courageous things. And I recognized that I started to feel this sensation, and I don't really know what it is. And it was fear. I would get afraid of some of the things I would have to do, and I would have to jump in with both feet and really punch through fear so I could get to the other side. And for me, that was courage. And one of the things that I did that would help me bolster my courage was I was like, listen, I can no longer be this tiny, small Sally that could make weight easy. I needed to be a jacked, muscly, like absolute womanimal that would eat bullets for breakfast. And so I started going to the gym, and there was one special, um, like, a place where you could go eat, and all they had was barbecued chicken and ribs. And I was like, okay, listen, I know how to eat. I know how to lift. I would go to the cafeteria, and I would just start chowing down. I would have 3 chicken breasts, and I would go breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'd be drinking creatine, and I'd drink my pre-workout, my post-workout. And I would be lifting weights. I lifted weights with the intention of being like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but as a female, because that made me feel more confident. That made me feel like I was better and stronger and able to do my job. And here was the most fascinating thing that occurred to me. And I saw it in real time, where I was small and lean and nimble and quick, and I wanted to become Hercules. And all I did was gain a tremendous amount of muscle, but my body mass really didn't change. And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, I could have been eating like this and lifting like this, and I still would have been able to make 59 kilos. My metabolism sped up. My confidence had increased. When I looked in the mirror, I felt better about myself. And it brings me back. So here I am, like coming out of, like last year, I would call it like dark night of the soul, where I was really like questioning and contemplating, what is God? What is my purpose on this planet? What is the meaning of life? And I have come out of that now, and I'm back in the gym, and I'm lifting, and I'm pushing weight again, and I'm eating chicken 3 times a day, and I'm meeting up with friends at the gym. And I've made it so that exercise for me really is one of the main drivers. It's one of my main 5 pillars: faith, family, fitness, friends, and finances. Fitness is important. And it's a place for me to have sisterhood, and for me to come together and to be able to come as a very balanced individual that wants to also push themselves physiologically. And I've never heard one person ever complain because they have lifted weight as they gotten older, because they're lifting weights, eating good food, and they're sober. I've only actually ever heard people want to share with others how joyful their life is and how good they feel. I mean, if the science shows that being healthy and eating right and really staying away from all the things that we know that science is showing are processed foods, alcohol, candy, and you stay away from it, and it's not a challenge for your life, why not do it more? Why do we feel that some place in our life has to suffer, that there has to be something that we have to sort of, there has to be some sort of wound that we're healing? We don't have to. We can actually just be joyful, complete humans that eat the food we want, that work out, doing the exercises that we want, with the people that we want, and we can actually have it all. And so for my fellow individuals that are aging and going through life, I'm reaffirmed that if you have it, you got to keep going, because a body in motion stays in motion. And the 2 years that I took off while I was contemplating all these other facets of life, my body got so achy. My mental health went down the hill, and I really struggled. And the number one prescription, the VA, they prescribe to you a whole bunch of pills. You don't actually need any of that. You can actually just get your body moving, and you can get your endorphins going, and you can get your friendships going. And it's all these things that we already know, but sometimes we get into these mental ruts of being stuck. And sometimes if we don't have the ability to reach out, it's someone that wants to reach in, pull us out. And we just have to keep on moving one foot in front of the other until we get a good pace going. And we make sure that we're surrounded with a community of people that want to go that pace with us. We just keep going forward, and we do it joyfully.
I want to comment on a couple examples that you used in that answer, and it kind of alludes to how much work you have yet to do. And that's that you referred to being like Schwarzenegger and being like Hercules, both male role models. And it just kind of struck me as like, well, what we need to be doing, and what I tell a lot of these young girls that I'm trying to get into wrestling, you got to be a Sally. And I was thinking there's other examples of bodybuilders and these female heroines. We should be, and women should be in particular, looking to as these are the role models. These are what I want to strive for. It doesn't have to be the male role models. It's got to be. I'm really tapping into my feminist side here.
Well, Jeff, I wanted to say I wanted to look like my friend Sandy, but I don't think how many people know Sandy Griffin Fitness? So hopefully you have her on in a future podcast so that people can see what she looks like. Then they would know that, because that was the only other female that
I was thinking Sandy as well. But Sandy's actually been on, I think, 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast. So the listeners should be fully aware of who she is. As we've moved now into video, now we'll get her on here so they can actually see her, and might even have to put some of those clips in, because she's shared a lot of pictures of kind of the before and after, kind of the Sandy 1.0 and the Sandy 2.0. And the phenomenal transformation that she's made in her life, fitness and everything else. So yeah, she is a great example. We also had, is it Sally Hendren? I don't know if you would know her or not. She's another friend of Sandy's we've had on the podcast, who is another, and she's a 60 plus bodybuilder. So there are some great examples out there. And I think it's really important for women to understand that they have their role models, and let's search them out. Let's put those up on a pedestal, not to idolize, but to emulate and to strive for. And so absolutely, be a Sally, be a Sandy.
So, 2 things. One is that Sandy was the one that wrote me my nutrition program when I was over in Afghanistan, and wrote me my strength and conditioning program. So that really was the vision in my head of what I saw when I was lifting weights. And the other example that I want to give about a strong woman, I don't know if people know this, but listen, Red Sonja. Do you know Red Sonja?
Oh yeah.
That was it. So that's who I wanted to be when I grew up. Yeah, Red Sonja. And in fact, guess what? I might have to be it for Halloween this year. Most people would be like, "Who's Red Sonja?" I'm like, "You don't know Conan's partner in crime?"
Yeah, that goes back. Wow, when was that movie out? That just shows how old Arnold is now.
Yeah, I mean, it was 80s. It was in the 80s.
Trying to remember who played her. Who was the actress that played Red Sonja?
Oh, I don't know. I'll
have to look that up now.
Google it up. And look it up.
So women do have their role models. And so as one of those role models, I want to put out there for all the young ladies that hopefully are listening to this, whether it's a young lady in her teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s. You're all young ladies in my perspective. But what words of advice do you have, particularly for the girls that are stepping into the pressures of competitive sports?
When you're stepping into I think 2 things. One is that this is for the girls, and this is also for the parents. Keep it fun for as long as possible, because the moment that it becomes competitive and you're training for a national title, a world title, an Olympic title, it becomes serious. And once that switch gets flipped, it's really hard to go back. And so keep it fun. and make it something that they enjoy doing. And until it gets to the point of having to be competitive, like truly, then you can start to shift gears. But even as you shift gears, you should always be able to have fun and find that enjoyment. Studies show that athletes that perform the best are having the most fun. There's this study where they had one person running, and you were either running from fear, like there was a lion chasing you, or there was joy at the end of the track, and you're running towards joy. And they found that the people that are running towards joy ran faster than the people running from fear, running from the lion. And recognizing that there's a point where it becomes competitive, it becomes serious, and you have to start dialing it in ways that you probably never thought. But you also have to be able to keep your joy. And the other piece that I want, and this is especially for girls and women, it's that it's swifter, faster, stronger. And you can't make any of that happen without nutrition. And for so long, we get read this narrative that it's calorie deficiency, or it's food manipulation. And you should be able to have it all. Like, you should be able to eat in moderation and to be able to eat healthy food and to find things that you like. This is, again, something that my friend Sandy taught me, was that you can actually make a cheesecake and eat it before a tournament if you swap out the ingredients. And if you're outside of the United States, it's usually so much easier because the world tends to eat healthier than we Americans do. And it's for my girls and my women, like, don't be afraid of nutrition, and you need to become your own expert, because food can be a lot of fun, and it's this magical fuel that you need to be able to really push your body to be able to do incredible things. The human body is incredible, but it needs to be fueled properly to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, one of the girls on our wrestling team here in West Lynn, she's been coming into my strength and conditioning sessions, and she was just talking about what she needs to do to kind of get to maintaining a little bit closer to her competition weight, so she's not having to cut weight, when the season comes around. And I'm just like, just eat cleaner, enjoy your food, don't feel like you have to diet. Just cut out the crap, eat healthier, and you're going to be right around the weight you need to be. And she's really only like 5 pounds over her competition weight anyhow. So it's like, God, that's a breeze to cut.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think the same applies, when you talk about running toward running toward joy, not to shift away from women's sports, but, my son was a wrestler and is now kind of it disappointed me at first when he decided he wasn't going to wrestle in college. He had some opportunities. I'm like, oh, dude, you're missing a great opportunity. I don't want you to look back and say, what if? But he wanted to get more involved in combative sports, in mixed martial arts. And so he's taken a dive into that. He's had his first 2 amateur fights and won both of those. But when he comes home from training, I have never seen him so excited about the sport. Wrestling, he liked, and his coach said this. His coach is also a promoter of MMA locally here, and he was talking about his most recent fight, and he said Liam Armstrong liked wrestling. He absolutely loves MMA, and it's like, it is so true, because he is so passionate about it, and he's so much more willing to train and eat right for it and everything else. And male, female, whatever, we have to run to our passions
That's
and
right.
really just kind of go whole hog and trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And so you made a huge transition, really going from an elite athlete to co-founding and becoming the CEO of Wrestle Like a Girl. What inspired you to do that? I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, okay, wrestling's kind of at the end. I need to do something. I think I'm going to start a foundation.
No, it was actually a bit different. It was when I was deployed to Afghanistan, and I was out on patrol with the Pathfinders, another special operations group. And we were walking towards a village, and one of the guys that I was with said, "Oh my gosh, will you look at that?" I look over to my left, and I was like, "Oh, like kids. Like, what's the big deal?" And he said, "Well, it's the girls. We've never had girls following us before." And I looked over and they saw my eyes and they got excited. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I bet this is the first time they've ever seen women in a position of power." Like, I'm at the front of the group and I'm leading men. And I look over and I say, like, I just give them an acknowledgement and the girls just come rushing over towards us. And, in Afghanistan, you just put your thumb to their thumb and it's like this little Afghan high five. So I'm giving all these little girls Afghan high fives. And it was in that moment that I knew that I wanted to serve. Like, that felt good to me. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. I didn't have any idea. So I was like, well, I knew I wanted to serve. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. And when I came home, I got redeployed. I came back to Fort Carson. I was wrestling in Colorado Springs at the World Class Athlete Program. And as you know, for wrestling, all of our best ideas happen when we're in the sauna. So I'm in the sauna and I'm sitting around with some of my other friends, like um, high level athletes. And we're sitting around and frankly, we're kind of like, we're griping about the things that USA Wrestling isn't doing right. Well, the women are getting this and the women are getting this and this is failing us and this is failing us. And I thought, wait a minute. Here I said I wanted to serve. There's clearly a need for an advocacy organization. Why don't we just create that? And so I sat around thinking, well, how hard could it be? And I had this, so now I had this concept that I wanted to serve. Now I had this concept that there was this need for an advocacy organization, like the voice of the affected athlete is the most powerful on the planet. Like, there's something that needs to be explored there. And then fast forward, I was by just a couple weeks, I got invited to go to a wrestling tournament, a boys and girls youth wrestling tournament. And there's this girl, she just beat a boy. And as she's walking off the mat, someone says something to her and she starts crying. And her mom brings this little girl over to me. And I look at her and say, "Hey, what's going on? Like, why are you crying?" And she said, "Well, I'm crying because I just beat this boy and he said that didn't matter because I wrestled like a girl." And I was like, "Whoa, what does that mean? Like, I'm I'm a two-time world bronze medalist. I wrestle like a girl." And I said, "You just beat him and you wrestle like a girl." I said, "It sounds to me like if that boy wanted to win, maybe he should have wrestled like a girl too." And so now I like had this sensation happening within me where I had my experience in Afghanistan, I had my experience in the sauna, and I had my experience here. And then it was like it all came together. And I was like, oh, I'm going to found an advocacy organization called Wrestle Like a Girl that's going to support girls and women in the sport of wrestling because girls that are the ages of 12 shouldn't be their own advocates to try and get opportunities for them to be able to wrestle at high schools and in colleges. Like, they need adults to be able to do that for them. And so I founded this organization, but it was funny because because of my background and I hadn't dove into leadership, I called a handful of my friends and I said, "Hey, we need this organization. I filed the 501c paperwork. I would like to hand it off to you. I think you're going to be amazing at it." And they were like, "No, I don't want to do this work." Click, click. Everyone was hanging up on me. I remember sitting down like, oh my God, I think I'm going to have to do it myself. And I did. And so, the organization got going. And about 5 years in, that's where the pandemic hits. Oh, this is really important. The pandemic hits. I'm at my house in Colorado Springs, and I am going through a divorce. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing for running this business. I've been sitting for like 2 years sedentary. This was before I found my business coach. And I got a phone call from Hollywood asking if I wanted to come out and star in a movie. If you know anything about me, it's that I absolutely want to be in Hollywood and I want to be an actress. Like, for the love of all things holy, this is all I wanted. I knew I would be amazing. So I'm like, okay, well, I have to make a decision. So for about 2 weeks, I remember walking around my house, like really ripping my hair out. What do I do? The organization hasn't gotten enough money to get off the ground and no one wants this organization. I've already tried. But if I leave it and I go act, then this organization's going to die. And basically what have I done for the last 5 years? So I have to make either a decision that I'm going to sit at the helm of this organization and truly become a leader, or I'm going to go to Hollywood and fulfill my lifetime dream of being an actor and whatever is going to happen. And yeah, I remember like dialing numbers, picking up the phone and telling my board chair, "Hey, I'm all in. Can we get on the Zoom next week? And can you teach me how to how to create a budget?" Like I was so sad. Well, I was all in, and so I then I put the idea of going to Hollywood and acting on the back burner, and I made that commitment to myself that I was going to truly learn how to become a CEO and lead a company and learn the X's and O's in business and how to speak the language of money and how to really make magic happen. So our goal within the organization, it's to have a $5 million endowment by 2035 and have all 50 states sanctioned to recognize girls high school wrestling as an official sport, have attained NCAA championship status. So the girls that wrestle in high school have affordable in-state opportunities to wrestle for an NCAA championship. The NAIA already has that championship, and the junior colleges, that pathway is getting created. And it's to also work within nations to help them build out their female wrestling pipeline, with the idea that nations wrestle freestyle and they'll be able to come back to the United States, wrestle at NCAA institutions, and be able to pair their education with wrestling and go back to their home nations and be productive citizens of society so that we can really start to shape and redirect our global world using our most powerful and untapped asset, which is our girls and women.
So now I know why the movie Red Sonja was never made. So do you have any really kind of specific success stories that come out of Wrestle Like a Girl and maybe that can help inspire some others?
Yeah. Well, my biggest takeaway, because at a certain point, like, man, you just have to put yourself out there all the time and let's try this and see if this works. And let's try this and see if this works. And I had to do one thing that was really important. And one is that I had to give myself creative freedom to take chances. And so, here's the thing. I could talk about wrestling and I could talk about the military, and I had to be able to go to dinner parties and engage with people from all walks of life, from all different social stratospheres. And that meant that I had to learn about other things to talk about. So I had to give myself permission to take chances. And the way that I did that was by allowing myself to become the world's most interesting woman. And that meant when people called me up, because before people would call me up and say, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I'd say, "No, I'm busy, I'm working." And I'd be working so hard on understanding financials and profit and loss statements that I didn't have time for anything else. And so now my friends call me up and say, "Hey, Sal, do you want to go salsa dancing?" "Okay, I'll go." "Hey, Sal, do you want to go to this pasta making class?" "Okay, I'll go." "Hey, do you want to go and, do you want to come and learn how to make guacamole from this incredible chef?" "Okay, I'll go." And it's like, well, what does that have to do about anything? Well, what are the chances that I'm going to be sitting at a table with the ambassador of Peru who's talking about their GDP and one of their biggest exports is avocado? And can I tell you the difference between different types of avocados? Well, wildly enough, I actually can, because I went to this class. So I knew how to make avocado, like just different meals. And so being able to give myself the permission to say yes. And in tandem with that, I also had to learn how to, in wrestling, my national team coach, Terry Steiner, he would say, you're not, it's okay to fail as long as you fail forward. But I even had to do it differently than that. I had to say, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I just continued to look for different experiences that there was no winning or losing. I was just getting an experience out of it. And when I started to approach life in a way that lended more towards curiosity, it made me have more fun as a business leader and really more fun as an athlete, right? Like, hey, do you want to go play pickleball? Okay. Do you want to go what is the thing? I've recently done Pilates. I remember I called up my girlfriend, Sarah McMahon, and I said, Sarah, I got to tell you, I was really nervous to tell anyone I did this, but I went and did Pilates. And she said, what did you think? I said, it was one of the most challenging exercises that I've done. I had no idea I had all these tiny muscles. And she said, I actually just recently went and did Pilates too, and I agree. So here you have these two combat athletes that thought we were each going to get made fun of because we're now talking about doing Pilates in our 40s. And in fact, we're finding that there's so many different ways to exercise and move your body and find joy in it. And it's by allowing yourself the permission to have fun and to become very interesting and get curious about life.
All right. So this kind of brings us to the point in the interview that I asked the question I ask of all my guests, and you've kind of alluded to it here and there throughout the interview. But what are you doing personally to age well?
Oh, so I'm having a lot of fun aging well. Personally, um, so I'm dialing in my nutrition. I'm learning how to cook. I really like pasta. I really like the Italian style of cooking. I have also just recently dove into arugula. Holy smokes! I didn't know that you could like a form of lettuce so much. So I've been really investing my mental faculties into cooking, into reading cookbooks and understanding heat, fire, salt, things like that. I've also started to recognize, like, you've mentioned it earlier in our conversation, mind, body, spirit. Well, the piece that I kept forgetting was the emotion. Actually, so I started working with a therapist. I went down to Mexico. I did some ancient medicines. I did a psychedelic experience for trauma survivors, and it was like I had this cathartic release. It was like an emotional enema. And I remember I came back from that, and I'm still working. I'm doing all these other things. I'm just like adding in more flavor and seasonings into my life and just becoming an attempt to be a very healthy, rounded person. And so I came back, I had this emotional enema of an experience, and I'm sitting down and I'm talking to one of my friends, and I'm like, I just can't stop crying all week. I've just been like crying, and I'm just starting to figure out like there's clearly something wrong with me. And I was on WebMD and I'm writing down, I'm like self-diagnosing, and it's time for me to have my weekly check-in with my therapist. And she's like, well, how was your week? And I said, well, I'm here to say I've got some really bad news. And she's like, well, what's going on? I was like, I was on WebMD and I can't figure out what my problem is, but I've been looking at my symptoms and I've narrowed it down to I'm psychotic, I'm bipolar, I'm manic. And she was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I was like, I can't stop crying. I've been crying all week. And she said, well, before we start to really push the gas on a self-diagnosis, she was like, let's just wait another week and then come back to the table and talk about it. And she said, but for this week, I just want you to sort of sit with your emotions. I just want you to like feel them. And I'm like, okay. Like, I don't even know what it means to feel them. It's just like I'm sitting in a chair and like rocking myself and like self-soothing and hugging like I should be in a straitjacket. And we come back for my next week meeting and she was like, how did it go? And I was like the craziest thing happened. Like I was like crying really hard Monday through Wednesday. And then on like Thursday, I cried sporadically. And Friday I was sort of okay. Saturday was okay. Sunday I went for a run. Like I didn't try and drink my emotions away or eat them or run them. I just sort of sat and just like let the emotions pour through me. And she said, yeah, so I don't actually think that you're psychotic or bipolar or manic or any of these things. She said, I think you're actually acknowledging your feelings for the first time in your life. And I was like, you mean people feel like this all the time? You're like, well, no, but if you've turned them off for the last 30 years and then you've opened them back up, like there is going to be an emotional experience that you have to start getting regulated. So I'm aging well by allowing my emotions to flow freely, recognizing that crying is cathartic and it's not a form of weakness, and being able to talk about what I want and what I need as a healthy individual that's able to be in a secure relationship with my friends and my family. And I'm really working on undoing generational traumas that have been following my entire family and the lineage. And I'm working on just being healthy all around. Like I'm not trying to become a bodybuilder or an ultra marathon runner. I'm learning how to just exist and be joyful and happy in my skin and carrying that with me through my lifespan.
Maybe that's Sally 4.0.
Yeah, baby, we keep going.
Well, what are the future goals for Wrestle Like a Girl, and how do you envision the impact of the organization on the next generation of female athletes?
Yeah, good question. So Wrestle Like a Girl, I'll tell you, we're growing. We continue to add one of our strengths as an organization is that we surround ourselves with people that are far more brilliant than I. And we've just expanded our board an additional 2 members. And we're coming together to really talk about what does Wrestle Like a Girl look like for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And where do we want to be and how are we going to backwards plan to get there? So Wrestle Like a Girl, we're gonna continue to be the global advocacy organization for girls and women in wrestling. We're still going to continue to be human rights defenders that speak up and speak out on behalf of our athletes around the globe that can be targeted and harassed because they come from an elite athlete world where they're held in high esteem. We're going to continue to fundraise, but I think the main focus that I have, and this continues to come forward, is that the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And as we're looking at women's sports and we're looking at this particular landscape, if you want to be a driver of making things happen, you have to understand the value of money and how to bring money into your sport. So I'm looking at Wrestle Like a Girl, and we're fundraising. So we right now have a campaign. It's called the Futures Fund. And our goal is to raise $5 million to support the 50th anniversary of Title IX. We just secured our first $1 million, and that came from 10 donors from within the wrestling space. And now we're broaching and going out beyond the wrestling space. And we're having conversations with foundations and corporations to say, here's our vision. We want to get 15,000. We want to get 250,000 girls wrestling in the United States. That's the equivalent of how many boys are wrestling. Although it just went up to 300,000 because boys are growing, so are girls. So we want to get 300,000 girls wrestling in the United States. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that by getting 15,000 female wrestling coaches, women that are new to the sport of wrestling. We want to get them involved into the sport, and we're going to empower them to go out and do clinics to get more girls to wrestle. So that $5 million that we're raising, it's going to be coaches education, it's going to be advocacy, and it's going to be devoted to research so that we can go and say, here's the girls that are now wrestling. Here's the girls that make up the composite of our sport. They're girls that have been invisible, girls and women. We're not taking them from other sports for the most part. Maybe they play additional sports after we get them involved. But for the most part, they haven't played a sport before. And they also come from challenging backgrounds, like the idea that girls and women are these demure, quiet creatures. Jeff, you and I both know that's not the case. Like, we want to be unbridled, unrestricted, to feel the true essence and the ferocity of what it is that makes up our constitution and our soul. And we want to be able to unleash that in a space where we are not just granted permission, but we're celebrated for being as authentic and vivacious as we want to, and really being able to own our space, our voice, our body. So getting coaches that are new to our sport, that are able to go out and support pulling more girls in and giving them the opportunity, because we've seen that it is the opportunity that facilitates the interest. Let's create the opportunity, let the girls come in, and we'll see where the sport goes from there. For the most part, Wrestle Like a Girl, we've been so focused on policy change that we haven't been driving concerted efforts to get girls into the sport. Because by and large, when we first started Wrestle Like a Girl in 2016, there was only 6 states in the union that recognized girls high school wrestling as an official sport. As of today, we now got that number to 47 states. So the 4 that we have left include Washington, D.C., Vermont, Delaware, Kentucky, Washington, D.C. And when we get all those states, now every state in the union will recognize girls high school wrestling as an official sport. That means girls get to wrestle other girls for a high school state championship, which means that girls are not wrestling boys, which means the injury rates are not like when girls were wrestling boys, we could show that injury rates would go up. Self-confidence for girls and boys would decrease. They didn't like wrestling each other. The biggest driver of what we had to do was change the narrative of what wrestling meant. Girls want to wrestle girls, boys want to wrestle boys. And there is a new narrative that is coming up that we could talk about. Probably not for this podcast, but well, how does the transgender mix in with that? As of right now, that's not even a topic that we're necessarily addressing because we still have 4 states where it is mixed gender, where you have girls and boys wrestling each other, and we need to be able to segregate them out so that we can create their own pipelines. And so to go back to your original question, where are we going to be? We want to be able to have 300,000 girls wrestling. We want to have collegiate opportunities, championships across all associations. We want to be able to have high school state championships, every state in the union. And we want to be able to start supporting other nations building their female wrestling pipeline so that they can get the same benefits, knowing that what makes America special, and I know that you know this because you're an educator, is that we are the only country on the planet that pairs athletics with education. If you want to wrestle outside of the United States, you're wrestling for a club. It's not associated with your school. And one of the first countries that we've started to have success with that model is with the nation of Jordan, where they paired, and it went with the private school, it was the private institutions. They said, we will make wrestling an after-school sport for boys and girls. That happened because the king wrestled, the prince, his brother wrestled. There's 1,000 princes within that country. Everyone wrestles, and it's a country that is surrounded by conflict. They're like, yeah, we need our girls to wrestle because life is not going to get easier. You've got Israel, you have Palestine, you have Azerbaijan, you have Armenia. Like all these countries are surrounding us. Saudi Arabia, Russia. Yeah, we need tough, strong girls that can think for themselves, that can also, here's something fascinating. I'm going off on a tangent. You're probably ready to hang up on me. It's that in Jordan, 97% of the women in Jordan are educated and literate. Only 13% of them work outside of the home. And they came to us and said, hey, we don't know how to change this. How do we bridge this cultural gap? We need workers. We don't have enough workers. And right now we're getting influxed with so many refugees that we're now having to figure out how do we incorporate the refugees into our work pipeline when in fact we have women that are competent, capable, speak the language and understand the culture. And I said, well, I don't necessarily know how you can do all that, but I'll tell you, I can teach wrestling. And if they can use that space to become more confident in who they are, we can use that to start driving a different cultural narrative about what life can look like beyond the wrestling mat. And so this beautiful gift that found me when I was so very young, we're now taking it across the globe so that it can find other girls and women and being able to reshape lives and change narratives so that they can be whatever it is they want to be when they grow up.
I hope the listener or viewer, whichever avenue they're getting this podcast, that if they take anything away from this episode is that they see what passion can do for you in your lives and just follow that passion. Because again, I was getting chills as you just went through that last answer again, because of the passion that you have for the sport, for women, for your country. The list goes on. I mean, you are just like the epitome of passion. And as expected, this has been a fun and really inspiring conversation. So how can those listeners or viewers, especially those that want to support women's wrestling and the efforts to grow the sport, how can they learn more about you, connect with you, and with Wrestle Like a Girl? Obviously, there's a website. Is there social media that you can share with us?
Yeah, we have a website, wrestlelikeagirl.org. I think we also got wrestlelikeagirl.com. So we got both of them. And we have social media. So Wrestle Like a Girl across the platforms. For Twitter, it's WRSTLE. There's no E. We ran into a character count. And then, listen, there's a few ways to get involved. One is that if you have a business or a foundation and you want to engage us, yeah, we would love that because you helping us means that we're able to drive our vision and drive our mission and support these girls. I love speaking, so I'm actually doing a couple more keynotes for companies. I'm coming out talking to them. I would love to do more speaking engagements. That's actually the first 3 years how I funded Wrestle Like a Girl as we were getting the organization off the ground. And also, we've got some really terrific events. We have our gala that is annual in the month of October. You can sponsor that. You can get a ticket. You can sponsor a girl that would otherwise not be able to attend. In purchasing a ticket, and we'll allocate that to a young girl so she can come and hear the words of what we espouse when we're talking about women's wrestling, creating the next generation of leaders. And we also we own the property of the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships. And that is going to be the championship that will eventually become the NCAA championship. This year, we have a minimum of 95 NCAA institutions that can qualify for that championship. We have 350 athletes from NCAA institutions that will be wrestling at that championship. We have now 6 qualifiers that the athletes have to compete in to get to that championship. And we need event sponsors. So if you guys are like, hey, I love women's wrestling, I love Sally, I want to get involved. Or if you're like, dude, this is going to be the mecca. This is absolutely where I need to be able to sell my product. And I don't even know what your product is, but you have 350 eyeballs that have been so long ignored, but they have money, their parents have money, and they would love to purchase things if they know that you're there to support women's wrestling. So there's a few different, oh, and also check this out. If you're like, hey, listen, I just like to host golf outings. I just want to have parties at my house. We would love to collaborate because there's a lot of different ways to fundraise where your skills, gifts, talents, and abilities can in fact support Wrestle Like a Girl. And there's ways to get you involved.
That is awesome. And I will share all those links if I can keep them all up, figure out what all they are. But Sally, I thank you for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I love what you were doing. I love the impact that I've personally seen you having on the sport and young women. Just keep doing what you're doing and keep aging well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.